Good evening, and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Fort Wayne Community School Board of Trustees. We will begin as we do each meeting, and to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And roll call of members. Steve?
Good evening, Steve Corona from the 5th District.
Good evening, Glenna Yale from the 2nd District.
Tom Smith from the 3rd District.
Maria Norman, Member at Large.
Good evening, Ann Duff, Member at Large.
Jordan Lebemoff, 4th District.
And I'm Julie Hollingsworth, elected from District 1. And to my far left is Janet Doherty, the clerk of the board. Good evening. And our superintendent, Dr. Wendy Robinson. Good evening. So we begin the meeting with awards and recognitions. And we start with, it's a good thing there's so many Snyder shirts I saw in the audience. It's recommended that the board recognize the Snyder High School students who place in the top 10 in the state for bowling. More than 196 schools from across the state participated in the Indiana High School Bowling Association State Championships in February. Naraya Jackson finished 8th out of 18 in the girls singles category. The Snyder High School girls bowling team placed 7th. So please come forward as your name is read so that we may congratulate you. 8th place in girls singles, Naraya Jackson. Naraya, what's your average? 188? 198? Ooh, nicely done. Very good. Is that the highest on the team? Okay.
Say it out loud. Yes.
Yes. And the rest of the girls' team, who finished 7th in state, Madison Claycomb. Amia Hoover. Did I pronounce that correctly? What is it? Amaya? Okay. Rhymes with Naraya. Okay, see? Torian Webb. Taylor Weldon. Stacy Wells. And of course, Naraya Jackson. Coaches, Andy Kaiser. Paul George. And Snyder Principal Nicole Chisley.
Parents, get up if you need to take a picture. Don't be ashamed. We'll stand here till you get a picture. Is that it?
Congratulations.
I have to share, I was on an elementary bowling team as a teacher at Ward, and my handle was Big Wally, and my average was 35, and I was proud of it. I had a T-shirt and everything with my name on the back.
And if there were only cell phones in that era.
Yep, there's a picture somewhere. So 198 is phenomenal.
And now we have another special award. It's recommended that the board recognize Emma Curry, a Northside High School senior, who was one of 12 in the state to receive the Chick Evans Scholarship for Caddies. Emma Curry, a caddy at the Fort Wayne Country Club, was one of 12 Indiana seniors to be awarded the Chick Evans Scholarship through the Western Golf Association. Scholarship is valued at more than $100,000 over 4 years. Evans Scholarship winners from Indiana will attend either Indiana University in Bloomington or Purdue University in West Lafayette, which each have housing specifically for Evans Scholarship recipients. There are currently 965 caddies enrolled in 19 universities across the nation as Evans Scholars, and more than 10,600 caddies have graduated as Evans Scholars since the program was founded by Chicago amateur golfer Charles Chick Evans, Jr. Emma was one of 3 seniors from Allen County to receive the scholarship. She is president of the Northside High School Champions Together and is currently ranked in the top 10 in her graduating class. Emma will attend Indiana University. Please come forward. Emma Curry. Also, Northside High School Principal David West, and Memorial Park Middle School Counselor David Thomas.
We also have our high school counselor here.
Okay, high school counselor
Vanessa.
Steinberg. Vanessa. What? Oh, I'm sorry, Vanessa Steinberg is right there in front of me. I'm sorry.
You can stand by her. All I am.
So Emma, I have to ask, do you actually carry like those 50-pound golf bags? Oh my God. I mean, the last time I actually played and carried my clubs for 9 holes, about killed me. Good job.
For that much of a scholarship, honey?
Absolutely. And you know, by the way, for you, you know, if anyone out there, especially, you know, maybe younger students are looking for a job, golf caddy, I highly recommend it.
But she learned about the scholarship from Mr. Thomas.
Uh-huh,
Shows that connection between middle school and high school.
absolutely,
Now, more important is when you're going to study.
yes.
She'll get back to it. You're going, that's all.
Okay, great.
With that scholarship, you can do. Congratulations.
Do you play golf?
No.
Wow, that's awesome.
Phenomenal.
That is a terrific program, too.
You know, Mark Giaquina was the first one to really talk to us about it and push it, and I appreciate Mr. Thomas following up, because those scholarships have been around for a long
Yes,
time.
they have been, yep.
And he was adamant about us making sure that our kids had an opportunity for that, so.
Okay, next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. Those are items that come to us every meeting. They include approval of the minutes from our last meeting, February 12th. They include vouchers and payroll approval, vouchers for the period ending February 26th, and payroll for the period ending February 2nd. It also includes the personnel report. Dr. Robinson, was there anything on the personnel report you wanted to
Not at
highlight?
this time, no.
Okay. And then it also includes removal of outstanding warrants. And Kathy, just basically, those are checks that were issued that have never been cashed?
Correct.
Basically? Okay, we're not putting out a warrant on
Yep.
anybody.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Members are free to take out any one of those items, but seeing no,
Madam Chair, I'd move recommendation of the 4 items listed under the consent agenda this evening.
Second.
thanks, Steve, thanks, Ann. Comments? Okay, all those in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Okay, we have no old business. Under new business, we have the purchase of some laptops. It's recommended that the board approve the purchase of 170 Lenovo ThinkPad Yoga 370 laptop computers from ProSys of Indianapolis for $158,224. The purchase of these laptops represents the second purchase of a 4-year plan that ensures teachers have current technology to support student instruction. These laptops are similar to the student laptops that are being deployed, which allow for both traditional laptop and tablet operations. Is that what you're using,
is what I
Ann?
have right here.
That's what I thought. Our technologically adept board member. Fort Wayne Community Schools was able to secure pricing that was below General Services Administration pricing. Indiana law does not require public bidding for purchases made at or below GSA pricing. Funding will come from the Common School Fund and Capital Projects Fund. Questions will be addressed by Jack Bird, Director of Technology. Do we have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Steve. Any questions?
Jack, do we know where we're putting these specific locations or buildings or general assignment?
These particular computers, when we deploy the 11E carts to students, we try to make sure that teachers have a corresponding 370. So these are catching up on some of the teacher computers that we were not able to get out this fall.
Okay.
So these computers go to individual teachers, they don't go with the cart?
They go to the individual teachers.
Gotcha, okay. Any other questions? Okay, thanks, Jack. Hey, all those in favor of approving the purchase, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Now we have the purchase of some IP security cameras. It's recommended that the board approve the purchase of Internet Protocol security cameras for Southside and Wayne High Schools from Presidio Network Solutions Group of Carmel, Indiana for $311,184.29. This purchase is for a transition from current analog security cameras to a digital IP security camera system at Southside and Wayne High Schools. This system will provide improved recording resolution, secured remote access for security personnel, and accessible archived video. The cost includes installation, licenses, 3-year warranty on equipment, and a 1-year maintenance package. Funding for this purchase will come from the Capital Projects Fund. And Dottie Davis, our Director of Security, is available to answer any questions. Do we have a motion?
So
Second?
moved.
Second.
Thanks, Jordan. Thanks, Maria. Any questions? Dottie, just one. So
Just,
I assume Snyder's cameras were updated in the renovation and that Northrop's will be?
Northrop is in phase 2 of the bond, so yes, they will
Okay.
be. That is correct.
And so what's the status with Northside then?
So Northside is for 2019.
Okay, okay. And
Is
so
that-
I- okay.
excuse me,
No, go ahead.
are those new cameras at Northside?
Yes, sir, those will be
So they
new
do have cameras now?
That is correct. They
Yes.
have the analog system that we are replacing at Wayne and Southside this year.
And what about the status of all of our buildings, Dottie? What,
Right. So our middle schools currently, Jefferson Memorial Park, have been completed, as well as Miami. And we have a 5-year replacement schedule for the district, so the rest of the middle schools will be completed after Northside is done. And then the remaining elementary schools that have not already been picked up in phase 1 and phase 2 of the bond will be completed.
Donnie, am I mistaken? Didn't we bring a big package? It's been a couple of months ago with some security equipment. Am I dreaming that? It's probably been that long ago.
We brought forward the wiring for this IP project
That's what I was
that we
thinking.
awarded to Premier.
Okay. So we probably need to just pull together, because this has been over the last year or so. You've gotten it in pieces. So I think we probably need to try to put all the pieces together. And then also talk a little bit about, like you said, some of the work was done when we did Snyder. So give us some time to kind of connect the dots for you, because we keep bringing pieces at a time.
so I know security is on the top of most everyone in this room. Are we transitioning, so do all of our schools have security cameras, either old technology analog
That is
And then
correct.
we're converting them to this newer technology.
That is correct.
Okay.
All of our buildings currently have the analog systems.
Okay.
Could you just explain how accessible are the high schools in terms of number of doorways that are open during the day?
So doorways, all doors are
No,
secure.
especially in the schools that have already been renovated, I guess. How accessible are the buildings?
So if you go to our schools, you'll notice signage that says all visitors report to door 1. We have worked very hard to get individuals that are reporting to our schools to know that we are not going to let them inside doors, that they have to report through door 1, go into the office and use the visitor management system where they produce identifications that we can check them into the building. And that is district-wide as far as our visitor management system and securing our doors.
Great, I just wanted to underscore that point, that we have been working on this
Yes.
in addition to the cameras, that our buildings are fairly secure as far as outsiders having access to them.
Yes, ma'am.
And it doesn't say when will these cameras be installed?
So currently, the wiring is already being installed, and the cameras will be ordered, and we hope to have this whole system up and running by the end of the school year. So
Okay.
2018, they will be live with the new Internet Protocol cameras.
Okay.
And Dottie, those internet protocol cameras allow for remote viewing by certain employees or people with administration, is that correct?
That is correct, sir. I can pull those up on my laptop remotely, so I can look at any building that has that system in place. And we also afford our security personnel, our law enforcement officers that work for us in the schools, to have access to that while they are on site as well.
Can't let this opportunity pass with your presence before us, but what were you thinking last week?
Always looking to see how we can improve upon our work that we are doing, but definitely looking at what was the method of entry for the individual, especially when it's a former student. That is one where people will recognize and not think anything of allowing entry. Why are we constantly telling our students, don't hold the door for somebody else, even if you think it's impolite, don't hold the door for them, allow them to have to buzz in. I believe that staff would have caught that in our visitor management system with the individuals that we have restricted access to our building. If they come up there, they would have immediately triggered a response that would have sent me a message electronically that this person was on site, and we could have reacted to that situation much quicker.
You have a good relationship with local law enforcement officers?
I feel very honored that I do, yes, sir, for having served on the police department for a few years. I have a very good working relationship with both Allen County, Fort Wayne PD, and ISP, as well as FBI.
I was just going to say, I think we're lucky to have someone with your experience and especially with, the connections you have locally.
Thank you.
And we've always had a great relationship with the Fort Wayne Police Department. And we also use fire department personnel in some of our schools, that we always have an adult that's, kind of monitoring things. So it's a great relationship we have, and thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Dottie, are there other things high up on your wish list that you would like to see the schools add in terms of any kind of security?
I think that's a conversation she will tell you a list longer than your own. We're gonna have a very specific session on that.
Yeah, we are going to have,
Yeah.
we are going to have
Yeah.
a board session on security, so
Okay,
keep that thought.
I certainly will.
She'll write it down.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the purchase of the cameras, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Okay, next we come to the construction contracts for the renovation of Northrop High School. It's recommended that the board approve the construction contracts for the renovation of Northrop High School. Michael Kinder and Sons is the selected bidder. The base bid is $36,488,000. There are alternates on here, which you can see. Some have been accepted, some not, for a total of $38,396,000. There are also the controls base bid from Automatic Logic, and that is for the high school and the football stadium. That's a total of $1,494,402 for a grand total of just south of 40 million. The project consists of architectural, mechanical, plumbing, and electrical renovations to Northrop High School. The existing building automation systems are proprietary, and Automatic Logic is a single-source vendor for this work. The project was designed by Primary Engineering, Inc. and Barton Co. Vilama Architects. Funding for the project will be from a combination of the 2016 School Building Basic Renewal Restoration and Safety Project, our bond project, as well as nutrition services and technology funds. The work will be completed in phases and is anticipated to be substantially completed by July 30th, 2020. And questions will be addressed by Director of Facilities Darren Hess. And you can see there on the back the 3 bidders, all fairly close in dollar amounts. Do we have a motion? A second?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Thanks, Ann. Any questions for Darren?
Just a couple, if I could. I know we're a little concerned because the bids came in higher than we expected, and I think what I understand is that the labor supply is getting tight.
That's correct. Everyone knows now that shortage in labor is finally coming to fruition here, so we're starting to see it in the bids. But we do have savings on prior projects and savings within the contingency for the program to make this happen, but definitely starting to see the labor shortage for our projects.
And we have a couple of other big projects just down the horizon a bit.
No, we do not. This is our last large one to bid for about 18 months. So I'm going to take the pause, let the market come back.
But we do have 3 more in the future, right? Is it 3?
4. We have
Four.
Price, Waynedale, Lindley, and Shawnee.
Okay, right, right. So they're 18 months off, so,
Yes.
okay,
We'll still be working, but we'll have to take a little time off.
exactly, right.
And we're not putting all-weather turf on the football field, correct?
That is correct. It'll still be natural grass turf.
Okay.
Any other questions? I know Northrop students are excited about those temporary classrooms. Snyder, you can tell them all about it. Well, the kids here, you probably didn't, you might not have experienced that, I don't know. That's what I thought. But my nephews loved it. They thought they were awesome.
They're air conditioned.
Yep, that's right. Okay, no other questions? Okay, thanks, Darren. All those in favor of approving the contract signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. And we have one last item, and under new business, and that is approval of the revised bylaws and policies. The Policy Committee has been hard at work reviewing our policies, and we have reviewed the 6,000 series under finances, 7,000 series under property, and also created a new policy, a non-discrimination policy. And I would like to make a motion that we remove the non-discrimination policy and consider that separately.
I'll second.
Anybody want a second? Thanks, Jordan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So let's do the 6,000 finances and 7,000 property. The Board Policy Committee is recommending revisions to Board Policies 6,000 and 7,000. Changes were made to the bylaws and policies that reflect changes in the law and practices of the district. Board members received ahead of the meeting red line and clean versions of the policies. The board bylaws and policies are available to the public on the Fort Wayne Community School website and also on file in the superintendent's office. The updated versions will replace the older ones, and questions will be addressed by Chief of Student, Family, and Community Engagement, Faye Williams-Robbins, or our General Legal Counsel, David Amon. Do we have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Approved.
Second.
Thanks, Glenna. Thanks, Maria. Any questions? Comments? Most of the series was pretty cut and dry, wasn't it? Just cleaning up some language and legal updates that were necessary because of new laws that were passed and things. Okay, seeing no questions, all those in favor of adopting these policies signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and now we have the non-discrimination policy. And interestingly enough, this is a first for Fort Wayne Community Schools. There are some places in various handbooks or individual policies that mention non-discrimination, but Fort Wayne Community Schools has never had an overarching non-discrimination policy. So here is the proposed policy. Fort Wayne Community Schools does not tolerate the unjust or prejudicial treatment of any individual or group's actual or perceived race, color or ethnic group, religion or religious practice, national origin, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, political affiliation, age, marital status, military status, veteran status, disability, or any other basis prohibited by state or federal law. The immediate remedy for any act of discrimination shall be to end it, treat the individual equitably, and as much as practically possible to eradicate any effects of discrimination. Discipline should be imposed where appropriate. And references are Indiana Civil Rights Laws, Title 6 and 7, the Civil Rights Act 1964, Equal Pay Act 1973, Title 9, Section 504, which is the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and the Americans with Disability Acts and ADA Amendments Act of 2008. Do we have a motion and a second for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Thanks, Ann. Thanks, Maria. Any questions or comments? Okay. All those in favor of approving the non-discrimination policy signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. And that brings us to reports. And we have a report tonight from Superintendent Robinson. As many people know, the state of Indiana is proposing different rules for how students graduate from high school. These rules involve different pathways to graduation, and some of the action that involves these pathways from both Indiana state law and State Board of Education are still pending. So there are some things we are clear about, but there are some things we are not clear about. So we'll get more on that from this report. Dr. Robinson?
Appreciate the opportunity. Want to say that this PowerPoint plus handouts associated will be on our website. I strongly urge everybody in the office, in the audience, to get on the website after the presentation and to review and read it. Following this presentation, this is not a decision-making presentation. This is to really jumpstart some conversations that we're going to be having probably over the next 3 to 5 years. So what I'd like to do, board members, if I could, is get through the presentation, have questions from the board members, and then close the meeting, and then we spend as much time as we need to we've got a list of speakers, have speakers come up and really express their opinion. Tonight, we're not going to try to address all of those questions, because as you'll see as I go through this presentation, there are a lot of unknowns, but there are some things that we absolutely know and don't need to spend a lot of time waiting to move forward. The title was FWCS Fulfilling the Pathways, but I thought this also, this title was as fitting as the conversation around the pathways, because the idea of the pathways is a political conversation. And what we have to do always in this district is to take whatever happens politically and figure out how it's going to suit FWCS and be in the best interest of not only our students, but our teachers and our parents and other stakeholders. So if you're given the opportunity, I'd like to go through some of these slides rather quickly, because they're just intended to put a context around the conversation. And then I want to really get into probably the heart of why most of the people are here tonight. One of the things I'd like to encourage the people who are here tonight is come back next time. Because one of the purposes of board meetings, and this board is really good about televising, but some nights we're talking to ourselves. And I think that as we talk about what's going to be in the best interest of students, adults, and this community, people need to get a frame of reference as to who's actually making decisions about what. Because at the end of the day, this board and this administration is going to be charged with making work whatever the state or federal government decides we're going to be held accountable for. With that, I want to start with something that hangs in this boardroom, the mission, the vision, and I think in red, educating all students to high standards. I've been in education over 40 years. We have over 30,000 students, but when it comes down to having conversations with students and parents, the number that's more important is 1. Because if you're a parent, if you're a student, you're more concerned about how something is going to impact you. But as a board and an administration, our responsibility is to look at totally how this is going to impact all of us. The next slide is on our core values, and I highlighted 2. We adopted this in 2008, and I think probably every year we've kind of had a conversation around whether we should change, what words still don't mean are valuable, which words are still explaining what we feel as a board and an administration. And I think those 2 highlight really why we're going to need to have this conversation today. Probably the last one, most of all. Because as the state constantly changes, that requires us to look at what we do next. So since I put equity up there, I want to make sure that we added the word educational equity, because equity has a lot of different meanings. But when you look in terms of educational equity, it gets to access of resources, educational rigor, needs the right moment in their education, despite, and I think it's really appropriate, we had a non-discriminatory policy adopted tonight. So that for us has to be what we define as educational rigor. The chief state schools officers, and they are, for example, like our state school superintendent, Jennifer McCormick, they're the secretaries of education for all the states. If you go to the next slide, they have, when you talk about equity, so how do you do that? Because you can get lost in words. You prioritize it. It's something that you absolutely set targets and you think about. You start from within. Here, they suggested working with the state agency, and fortunately and unfortunately for us, we have 2 now. Not only the State Department of Ed, but now the State Board of Ed has its own staff and is issuing guidelines for what we need to do in terms of getting our job done. You measure what matters. You as a board constantly ask me to demonstrate, well, how do you know that worked? Go local. What's the tailored and differentiated support you're going to provide? 5, allocate the resources to make sure whatever you say you believe you're getting done. On the next, start early. And as we talk throughout the rest of the sessions this year, one of the things we know, we've got to look at, we're trying to implement even full-day kindergarten, full-day pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds. Because if we don't start early enough, our babies are not going to have that, really that boost they need. Monitor around standards and assessments. How do you know that kids are achieving mastery of standards? Because the one thing that's certain in this whole plan is the state's already adopted their standards, and those won't be changing. So those are the things that we know we're going to be held accountable for. Focus on teachers and leaders, improve conditions for learning, empower student options. But when you talk about options, it's not just the students, it's their families and extended families. Because if parents aren't real clear about what these pathways are, when you talk to students, some of the impetus for taking harder classes, for doing well in school, it starts in the home. So we're going to have to do a much better job of educating not just the students, but their families about what the options are. The next, this hangs in our boardroom. Professional learning, the personalization, the precision. Talking about what we do is not good anymore. How do we demonstrate that the things we think we've implemented are absolutely getting results? The next slide, I think, points to something I believe sets us a little apart from other districts. Our pyramid for success talks about if you want academic success, there are readiness to learn factors that you have to make sure that you are considering when you're looking at the academics. Because all students don't come to school with the same background. All students don't start with us in pre-K and go through 12th grade. So that's something we have to be mindful of. The next is just a reminder that the school we all attended as adults is not the same school that our students have to attend, and we are trying to prepare students now for jobs that aren't even invented. So part of what we have to look at, the academics are critical, but there are some of those 21st century skills that businesses, and really being very honest, the pathways are about what are those skills, creativity, problem solving, citizenship. Those are the things that the pathway now are bringing to the forefront in addition to the academic parts. So let's get to the pathways. They begin in the fall of 2018, which is almost depressing because as of today, I still don't know all of the guidelines about what the state expects for us to do with pathways. Most districts are in the process of trying to get schedules put together, trying to do budgets. But the one thing I do know, the current 7th graders will be the first ones to actually be impacted by this pathway. So if you go to the next slide, that's bigger than I thought it would be. There are 3 parts to the pathways. The first is the high school diploma. Currently, we have 4. Because of federal guidelines, Indiana has to get down to 1. And so what they are planning to do, have not decided yet, is you have a diploma, and then students earn, I don't want to say sticker, seals, and I don't know what that'll look like, that get affixed to the 1 diploma. So in essence, what we currently do, that's been taken away because of ESSA at the federal level. We're going to get to 1. The other very important part to this is that 1 diploma now is the core 40. We no longer have the general diploma. The core 40 is the floor. Now, they are talking about waivers for special ed students, but none of that's been adopted yet. So what we have to go by is that 1 diploma, core 40, and how do we determine what seal gets affixed to a student's diploma, and how do we determine how we say that is what kids have earned. The second, to me, sounds real good on paper, because employability skills, if you see, there are 3 different ways that students can earn this part. And let me be clear, you have to do all 3. You have to do all 3. One of the most frightening parts about some of the conversation is that they're trying to figure out, do kids get credit for being on athletic teams? The last conversation was, well, to have this part, you have to have a paying job. So there still are lots of different conversations floating around as to how students will earn that second part. But remember, it's all 3. For me, the most troubling part is 3. Because if you look at the top, it says honors diploma, but I just explained to you that they have gotten rid of the honors diploma because now we're down to 1. So I'm not sure what that's supposed to be, and I'm not sure what guidelines there will be as to what constitutes that honors experience for them to count it. If you look at the others, and this is the part that is troubling for me, they're basically all a series of tests. And one of the things we started out with this whole pathway conversation was to reduce the amount of testing. So let me say this. There's nothing wrong with this pathway, because we should have different ways for kids to graduate, and it should not be a one-time test. But here's some little hidden things you need to take into account. Look at the ACT and SAT. For the last several years, the state has paid for every student to take ACT. But everybody does not take SAT, because SAT is a screener for whether you get in college. So what the state's looking at is the reason they have ACT and SAT. Right now we get letter grades. So one of the pieces of deciding our letter grade is all the students will take the ACT, all the students will take the SAT, and they'll subtract the grade, the difference, and that's our growth. The cut score that's been discussed is higher than the national average. So if our growth as a district, as a school, if our letter grade, part of that will be impacted by scores on ACT and SAT, we no longer have the luxury of not having kids prepared to take ACT and SAT. So just by the definition of 3, the state has changed the expectations for what all kids have to do to graduate. The next one is the ASVAB, and this one, for those of you who are in the audience, those are a series of tests that kids take to determine aptitude to go into military service. And in today's environment, every time I see a military person, I thank them, hug them, try to kiss them on the cheek, because it takes a special person to put their life on the line. But what this does is this is one of the options for 3. What is a little concerning is if you take the test, for it to count for number 3, do you have to enroll in military service? So what we have to watch and what you have to watch is that we don't have a part of a pathway.
To be clear, we don't know that yet.
We don't know any of this.
Yeah, that is just one of the things that, do you just take the test, or do you have to enroll? That is an unknown, okay.
We don't know what the honors is. We don't know what they're going to do with
Right.
the AC,
Yeah,
SAT.
we don't know what the cut scores are.
We don't know the cut scores. But as you go down, the Career Technical Education Concentrator, you know, some of the work that kids are doing at the Anthony Career Center, some really high-level work in terms of getting a technical honors. AP, IB, dual credit. This new one is the Cambridge International Courses in CLEP. Those are all exams that were not on the table for kids to have to take before. So if you just look at the list, we have added quite a bit of standardized testing to determine that number 3. And then the last one, which holds promise, but we don't know what the guidelines are, is a locally created pathway that meets the frame and earns the approval of the board. And part of the conversation tonight is about what that locally created pathway is, because it gives us the option to determine what makes sense for us. But at this point, as superintendent, I can't tell you if any of this will be what's in the final bill. And as I get a little further, I'll explain to parents and others what that bill is, because that's the one we need to pay attention to. That's the pathways. So here are the diploma bills. I think these are, David, 120 pages? 100 and a lot. Shortcut, Senate Bill 177 is going to be collapsed probably into House Bill 1426. So the one to monitor is House Bill 1426. I think there are hearings on it this week, probably next week. The legislators are trying to have an early session, so we only got another couple of weeks before we should be able to know a little bit more about, as Julie talked about, what's in 3, what's in 2, what's in 1. But if you kind of look at these first 4, this was in 177. It kind of talks about, sort of kind of talks about, what I tried to describe. One of the conversations that's going on now, if you look at number 3, is Algebra 2. Another one is Econ. They're trying to decide what are the have-to-do courses in the math and science area, very specifically. And then one of the ones, number 4, talked about a school fast-track program, and we've researched, we don't know what that is. So, but this was in 177. Let's go to 1426. This has a little bit more meat to it, but what it talks about, and I won't try to read through these, this is the bill that everybody should study. Because when you think, just look at 3. Replace the graduation requirement of taking an end-of-course assessment with a nationally recognized college entrance exam. A college entrance exam is not the same thing as an end-of-course test. So right off the bat, we've traded ECA for nationally normed college entrance exam. So if you go to the next one. Waiver for post-secondary readiness competency requirements. We used to take the test for Ivy Tech AccuPlacer. Was that the name for it, Faye? Yes. AccuPlacer. So there are a lot of different tests that students had to take that were a part of our college and career readiness prior to all of this. So I won't go down through all of them, but I think you need to have the context that when we talk about why you're here tonight and what the concerns are, I'm guided by what the state is requiring us to put in place to address these issues. Because we're going to be accredited, and kids are going to graduate. So these are just some of the basic things to put in front of people.
I just want to make one comment. Can you go back to the previous slide, Melanie? This is, in my opinion, typical of the way that the legislature operates. If you read number 2, charter schools call themselves public, but this is the latest thing in charter education, is they want to be able to limit themselves and not accept any new students during the school year. Any of you students in the audience ever have any new students come into your classrooms during the school year? Absolutely. We are public schools. We accept everyone. That is part of our mission. That is what we do. But here we have our Indiana legislature that wants to call charters public schools, but they want to play by different rules than us. And the playing field just keeps getting more unlevel. And if that concerns you, as someone who has kids in public schools, I hope that you'll let your legislator know that.
Well, since she brought that up.
That should be taken out of 1426.
But look at
that doesn't
it.
have anything to do with the rest of the bill.
Okay, but look at it, and I'm glad you brought it up. May limit new admissions to allow each student who qualifies for free reduced lunch to receive preference for admission. That sounds like a noble thing, doesn't it? But read the rest. Only if, when they put their charter together, they said they were going to do that. So if when they wrote the charter and had it approved, they didn't say that our preference will be for free and reduced lunch students, they get to limit who they admit. So I'm glad, I was going to try to get past that so that I wouldn't get editorialized.
No, that's not happening.
But I think all of you need to understand what we in this administration and the school board look at when we're trying to make decisions. So what do we do? Because here it is. And let me say this, the pathways aren't going away. The time for that conversation was probably 2 years ago. And they had pretty much decided as a state 2 or 3 years ago that this is the direction we were going to go. When we were upset about I-STEP and how long the test was, they were writing the pathways. So we had lots of committees, we talked about it. We even talked about what pathways should look like. The committee made recommendation. None of what we recommended, because I was on the committee, is in these pathways. So the idea of the pathways was not new, but not written as they are. So what do we do now? Well, step one, we have to ask ourselves, because we have to make this work for us. Here are the questions we need to ask ourselves, and that's that we right now as the board and the administration, but it should concern everybody in the audience. So who do we teach? If we go to the next slide. We're so used to Fort Wayne that we forget, if you go to the next slide, we're the largest district on most days. Those are the numbers. When I explain to people how many schools we have and the different varieties of schools, most have one high school. They cannot understand the large, diverse district that we are. If you look at the next, here are demographics. This is where people live. These are the people that make up our district, 70 languages spoken, and all of them, we're responsible for graduating them. We take that on gladly. But this is not the profile for most districts in the state. If you go back, here's our staff. And part of what happens, and part of the reason most of you is here, the minute I try to say something to one person, it's like their string telephone thing. By the time it gets to the third person, that's why I'm glad you're here, so you can hear exactly what the conversation is. It's not even the same conversation. And part of what we also have to do is before we can actually make a decision at this board level, there are a whole lot of people we have to talk to. And the one thing that we can't remove from any conversation is emotion. But I hope we can just let's get the facts first, and then we'll talk about where we go from there. We're huge, proud of it. And for our size, we do a really good job of trying to make sure that we make the best use of the resources we have. What do we teach? Krista helped me put this chart together, and I was trying not to be mean about it. But for kids who are graduating this year, these are all the changes that the state has made in accountability, curriculum, what they want us to do as a district. So I'll just give you a minute. And if you put in place all the ones that are going to be connected to the pathways, that's probably another page. So I think you need to see that this begins at the state level, and right now we used to have the legislators and the State Department of Ed. Now we have a new player, the State Board of Ed. And a lot of these different changes are coming directly from the State Board of Ed. They are not elected, they are appointed by the governor. So if you go to the next page.
Dr. Robbins, can I point out one thing, and
Go
that
back, Mel.
is, so A to F school grading has been in effect for 7 years, and we have had 3 changes to it already. Our joke used to be, as soon as we got it right, you know, under the initial rules, Fort Wayne Community Schools earned an A, so they changed them. And then in 13-14, we had like 25 schools get an A or something like that, and the district got an A, and so they then changed them again. So that was our joke, that as soon as Fort Wayne Community Schools got it right, then they had to change it.
One of the things that I also need to say is that this whole A to F, the pathways, this is a national trend. So if you look across the country, this isn't just something we make up. This is a national trend coming from the National Department of Education for other districts, for other states to follow this. So we'll go on. So what are we going to do about it? We are in the teaching and learning business. And so in order for us to be successful, the first thing we have to make sure is that the curriculum we have is the best possible, most rigorous curriculum, because if we don't, it's impossible for teachers and students to know what they're expected to do. So we have embarked upon, for the last year and a half, we've done an audit of our curriculum. And we realized that we are not consistent in our math curriculum. We are not consistent in our language arts curriculum. In particular, not that we're not working hard, not that we're not doing good things, but the new pathways require different competencies. So if you look on the next page, we are beginning a curriculum development process that if you look down at the bottom, folks, it's going to take us at least 3 years. But we have a federal grant that, being honest with you, we're going to be working intently on this for 5 years. Because if we don't make sure that what we're teaching is the absolute most rigorous and top-notch, there's no way in the world we're going to meet the pathways. That doesn't mean that what we've done is wrong, because we had an 89–90% graduation rate. But if we're not careful with all these new rules, our graduation rate can drop into the 40s, surrounding districts into the 60s and 70s, because what they're expecting students to do don't match up with what we're teaching. So that really is, that's the issue. It's a huge issue. So if you go to the next one, this is what's caused most of the furor. But I want you to understand clearly. We're doing language arts and math now because this starts impacting 7th graders. There'll be 8th graders in the fall. But in 1920, we have to start science. And we have to look at social studies. So over the next 3 years, we have got to look at the core subjects. The core subjects. Now let me state it here. And maybe it's even in another slide, and I'll repeat it again. We're not doing away with art, music, and PE. We're not doing away with the extracurriculars. We're not doing away with the magnet programs. And we're not doing away with the programs of study. What we're focusing in on are language arts and math, because those are the gatekeepers for all the other topics. And if kids don't have the right math skills, if kids don't have the right language arts skills, they can't be successful in the pathways. So, we tried to put this visual together to explain what we have to look at in terms of rigor. The green is, at this point, folks, everybody, I don't care what label they have, there are even now new guidelines for special ed students. We're going to have to look at where special ed students, what courses they're going to have to take to meet the requirements that are different now. So the green is all, and everybody has to have increased rigor. Because the core 40 now, remember, is the default. No more general. Honors with distinction becomes the next level. But there's no consistency across the district, even within schools, and definitely not across the state as to what constitutes honors. And we're going to have that conversation, because remember, now you don't get the diploma, you get a seal. So what is that seal, and what does it take to get that distinction on your diploma? But the top level is where, if you go back and when you get time to review it, in that box 3, that's what they highlighted. So what kids are being forced to really have to look at is AP, dual credit, IB, CT, because those are all courses that have some type of standardized test. AP is AP. And one of the things that we've got to have conversations about is we don't have enough kids take the AP test. Now, one of the reasons the average cost for an AP test is $93. So that is a stopper for most kids even thinking they're going to take the course or take the test because of the cost.
Does the state still pay for some
Some,
math and language arts?
some science, some.
Science?
Yeah. But the more AP courses the student wants to take, the higher that cost. And here's the real kicker. You get college credit for the courses in gold. And so we're having kids leave with their first year of college already done in a public school system. So we have got to ramp up who's taking AP? How many courses are we taking? So when you look at this, I hope it kind of helps you explain. We can have that conversation about the honors. We can talk about it. But colleges aren't checking how many honors courses you're taking. Colleges are checking how many AP courses, how many dual credit, and the big thing now is, did you take the test and score a 3, 4, or a 5? Okay? Now, this is important because everybody doesn't have to go to college. But some of the CTE certifications, some of the things that you're doing for welding or other kinds of jobs, they're also expecting there to be a different rigor in terms of what kids are taking. So that's kind of like explaining why we're having these conversations. But let's get into what has really been the focus of the conversation. This is impossible to read, and it was never intended to be something for parents to even begin to understand. We're just trying to figure out how we're going to put a schedule together. We gave it to teachers because the next thing we have to do is to kick it around and figure out, well, what's going to work and not going to work. We have not even done allocations. We have not even done schedules. Because part of what we're trying to make sure, and this is something the board's going to have as something we discuss, we may have to have different allocations to meet some of the expectations for the courses that kids are going to have to take. So this is the language arts one. The kind of orangey, peachy, whatever color is what we're looking at for 18-19. And that's the transition year, because remember we talked about 7th grade starts this, 8th graders start this in 18-19. The blue is where we intend to get to. That's where we intend to get to. But here's the piece that's not on here. In order for this to work, we have to start at 4th grade. Because if kids in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade don't master math skills, they're never going to be able to take 4 years of math in high school. So this is looking at big picture. This is a 4th grade through 12th grade conversation, postgraduate conversation, because if you're expecting your child to go to college, what do we need to do? So language arts is one thing, but let's get to math. Oh, let's do this one. If your child is already in high school, we are not changing what things are called and what they do. But if they're starting in ninth grade, that's where we're having this conversation about what's honors and what's not. Because if we know the pathways are going to be in effect from now on until, I don't know when there'll be another governor who decides to change, at some point we have to start it. So ninth graders currently, 10, 11, 12, it is what it is. We're not going to take kids out of courses that they're currently in. We're not changing what they are taking, but we have to start somewhere looking at what is the rigor. And one of the things we intend to do when we get to math, you'll see. One of the parts about language arts is we're trying to make sure that, for example, as we get into the sciences, as kids are taking biomedical or project lead the way engineering, is there a way for a student in their 11th grade or 12th grade year to take an engineering course and get a language arts credit? Because here are the kids who also suffer in our current system. Most kids who are taking AP are in band and this and working and that, and our current schedules aren't flexible enough because of staffing and because of what we call things for kids to be able to take a wider array of honors courses, because sometimes they're offered at the same time. So we've got to look at a way to be more flexible about how you get the honors distinction, because there's only so many resources. So the language arts, that is what it is, but the math is what's causing most of the consternation. And one of the things is that we have done a phenomenal job in this country of making people think they don't understand math. That you have to have some aptitude for math. Well, some people have an aptitude for things and it comes easily. But we're an educational organization. We know what skills kids are going to need to do math. We have to not only help the students, but we have to begin by helping the teachers in elementary and middle understand how to teach math. Now, when you look at this chart, most of the boxes are pink. And you know why? Because those are all higher level courses that we got to stop messing around with Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry and get to the courses that are going to get kids college credit and are actually going to be the higher level courses that allow them to have different options when they go to college. So to that end, if you look at the next, one of the heaviest lifts is going to be at middle school. If kids are not taking algebra in 8th grade, and I want kids to take algebra in 6th and 7th grade if they're capable, kids are going to have to take 4 years of math in high school if they're going to college. If we don't start them earlier, if they miss a year, or if they're not successful a year, what happens to their ability to graduate? They can't meet that pathway because they won't have 4 years. So if you look, as I said, this is not impacting what's happening to kids who are already in high school from the standpoint of what we call it and what we're offering. These are conversations we need to start about 8th graders and 9th graders. We don't even have schedules. We don't have, this is how it's going to look. But I hope you see why we're having this conversation, because those kids entering high school have to meet a different pathway. They have different expectations for graduation. So how do we teach? We are not naive enough to say, just because I said they're all going to take algebra in 8th grade, voila. Doesn't happen that way. And the first thing we have to do, people, we have a grant. The federal government has enough faith in us. We have a $50 million grant for the next 5 years, 3 years are guaranteed. And we are going to use that grant very specifically to work with teachers to improve their skills. But you'll see we're also adding a piece, how are parents going to track this? How are parents going to know what they're supposed to know? So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each one of these slides, because if you come back to the board meetings, we're going to be talking about what each of these look like. But if you'll indulge me, let me just kind of, here's the peer grant. The first one is that language, and I'll just let you look at that for a moment, and then I'm going to take you quickly through slides. So the first is the Dana Center work. Mel, if we can get to that next slide.
Can you explain, every time we see the Dana Center, I think about that plant on State Street.
Yeah. Okay, the Dana Center is located at the University of Texas at Austin,
Okay.
and they are internationally known for helping districts with math. Doug is our person. Doug has worked with states. Doug helped Indiana write some of their math standards. So we went and found people who know what it is Indiana's doing. Bonnie is out of Center Point, and Bonnie is in Pennsylvania someplace, but she works and connects with Doug because most of the time, if you're working on your math, you better work on your language arts. Because if kids aren't reading well, they struggle with math. So Dana Center, Center Point, you can look them up on the website. We looked for people who had some knowledge of what was happening in Indiana and could help us figure out what to do with our curriculum to increase the rigor. So this is just an overview of what it is they're going to do with us. But what you need to know is we are going to have teams of teachers, pre-K through 12 for language arts, pre-K through 12 for math. And this summer, beginning this spring, teachers, 2 per building, are going to help us write our curriculum. So I can't tell you what all this is going to look like. We're going to get the experts in the room. As a part of that process, all of the thoughts we have about what is honors, we're going to sit the teachers down who teach honors classes. We're going to tell them, here are some things that have to happen based upon, now you tell us how this should look. So all of that's involved in this Dana Center, Center Point. They're bringing in consultants, but the work will be done by classroom teachers to develop what is our pre-K through 12 language arts and math curriculum.
So you've identified what teachers are going to do and the work they're going to get involved in. I know we're going to hear from parents tonight, but what is the ongoing role for parents in this process?
Well, I'm going to talk about that
Okay.
because I'm going to show you a system we have to put in place. Because I was at a church yesterday, Faye and I were, and we were trying to describe pathways. And these are people who are professional people, graduated from college, and one of the ladies said to us, could you also hold sessions for parents to explain the math? Because I'm at a level now, when my child gets into higher math, I don't know how to help anymore. And so one of the things that we're going to be doing in conjunction with Faye at the FACE Center is every step of the way of these pathways, we're going to have sessions for parents to say, now this is what this means, and this is what you should be pushing your child to do, and here's a resource. So we know that when you're making these kind of changes, parents have to have as much of an education as the students do, and those are some of the things that we're looking at making sure that we do. If you go to the next one. We also are going to be working with Discovery Ed, because those terms STEAM and STEM are just the buzzwords now. But what they actually speak to are ways of integrating different subjects to solve problems, a lot like what happens at New Tech. It's not unlike what happens all over this district, because there are teachers that just do this naturally. But what we're working on are 2 magnet feeder patterns, the Southside feeder pattern and the Wayne feeder pattern. So I just have that up there. Remember I said science is until 1920? Well, we're going to get a jump start, because some of the things we're going to do with this group is using digital textbooks. Because as we try to make decisions about textbooks, that might be something that happens all over the district. But you got to be careful of load. We're going to have enough load with language arts and math. But we want to get ahead of the science conversation too. The next one is just the K-12. I've tried to kind of talk through that. The next slide, this is when you ask about parents. This is more of an adult slide than it is a student one. We have all kind of conversations about Power School and the grade book and how grades are determined. That whole assessment suite, the state's going to be changing all of the assessments the students have to take. The LMS, you see that down toward the right? As we develop the curriculum, where will teachers go to know what it is they're supposed to teach? And how are they supposed to know what the grade level prior, and how do they know, what do you do with highly able kids that need to be accelerated? And what do you do with kids that need an extra push? And down on the right, the big circle by itself, how would a staff member get the professional support to improve their skills? Because we just can't say to teachers, go do better. Because most of the things we're going to be expecting of people are not what they learned in college. And some who've been here like me 40 years, this wasn't even on the radar when we were in educational organizations. So we have to be very mindful. So Steve, that's a broad picture, but we'll be talking about each of those. But the biggest thing, Steve, I think that to that answer is every time we come to a board meeting, we're going to have a different topic. So we're going to tell parents what the topic is. I invite you to come back and listen, because that's the only way you're going to get the actual information about where we are with it. And I hope some of you commit to doing that. We're also working with the PTA, because to have 1 or 2 schools involved is one thing. We have 50 schools. And so how do we communicate to all parents in all schools what their responsibility is to know what's going on? So the last one, which is really this whole human capital management. This won't mean a lot to most folks, but if we're not providing opportunities for our staff members to improve their skills, shame on us, because we're not going to get all the goals that we need to. Most of the conversations as I've talking to students, most of the students were concerned about the impact of all this on their teachers. And that's noble. I'm worried too, but the first has to be, what is it that we have to do for students to make those pathways? It's on us, however, to provide that support for the adults. Okay? So the next one. How do we measure the effectiveness? This is what board members ask me all the time. Balanced scorecard, school improvement department plans, those are still there. But this board engaged in some community listening tours. And being honest, not a lot of people showed up. So some of the conversations we wanted to have were the pathways, and we had a handful of people show up. We're going to put a dashboard together as a part of what we heard, because on a quarterly basis, we're going to be talking to you about whether we think we're successful with certain things. And that's something new, Steve, as we talk about how we're going to communicate. So let's get to the next slide. What's not changing? Honors distinction, and remember the conversation about 9th grade. It's not just having an honors course, which will not happen at 9th grade. We will have a process for how kids get the honors distinction. Programs of study don't change, the magnet programs don't change, the fine arts extracurricular, and all of the AP IB. As I've had conversations with board members, the whole 9th grade conversation is what we have proposed. We have lots of conversations to figure out how that works. But I just want to be transparent as to what's on the table, so that people don't walk away thinking that I ignored what's the elephant in the room.
To make it clear, when you say honors distinction, that means on my child's transcript, I can still have honors geometry and whatever grade I had for that, but that geometry class will be an integrated class with all levels of students.
Well, see, we haven't put schedules together yet, but the intent is that at 9th grade level, as we're increasing the rigor, we will have more kids who should have the opportunity to have honors. But the first question we have to resolve is, what is honors? What is consistently going to be what you have to do to get the honor seal?
School by school, district-wise.
It's district-wide, because right now it's not the same. It depends on what school you're in. But here's the difference. On a transcript, they get the honors. On their diploma, they get the seal. And there have been lots of conversations about, well, when you mix kids together, some of them may not be motivated, some of them may not behave. Well, people, we have to deal with that. Because if they are not, they're not going to graduate, and that's on all of us. So as it stands now, this has nothing to do with 9, 10, 11, 12. It has nothing to do with any of the conversations we're having other than language arts and math. And it doesn't change any of the programs of study. And as people talk about who will be in what classes, if I'm in the bioengineering course, biomedical, or engineering, or IB, I'm automatically in a pathway. So what we're talking about are those basic language arts and math skills, and trying to push kids in the math up to the pink stuff, because that's the higher level. Now, you're not voting on that. You are listening to what I'm proposing. We're going to have lots of conversations, and before we get to a final decision, we'll be back here. Okay, we have lots of people to listen to, but I don't want to trick people because it's not on there. But the honors distinction is what the state's going to. You get the little seal, remember?
Right, and that would that be the equivalent of Core 40 with academic honors?
It should, but the state hasn't put the guidelines. That I hope would be the intent.
But back to my original question, 5 years down the road, the thinking is, well, you'll take geometry as a junior now, right? No, yes.
As a sophomore.
Well, down the road, wouldn't it be junior?
Well, it'd be a junior.
For sophomore?
Yeah, because right now we have kids that are, like we're even talking about whether it's Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, and we can debate that and it won't matter, people won't agree to it. But one of the reasons we're looking at Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry is if we're going to everybody taking the SAT, you got to have some Algebra 2, and you take the SAT at the beginning of your junior year. So we've had kids who keep struggling on the SAT because they're tested on math that we haven't had because of the sequence. So as we're looking at this, we're trying to look at it, that's what kids are going to be held responsible for. And depending on these math people, and Julie's one of them, they can argue about the sequence of it, but being honest, to be successful, you need all three. If you're going to take the SAT, there are also geometry skills.
So 5 years down the road, geometry, on my schedule will say I'm in geometry. On my diploma, if I have, or on my transcript,
On your
I should say,
transcript.
on my transcript, if I have met the requirements for honors, I will have honors geometry on my transcript.
Honors geometry will be on your transcript.
But the way I understand it is you can get an academic honors diploma without having taken honors algebra or honors geometry. It's more courses that you have to take. They don't have to be honors courses.
Right.
You just have
It's
to
just the
take to a
course.
certain level, right, meet certain credit requirements and a certain grade average. Okay.
And see, those are the kind of things, when we're talking about what we have to talk about with parents, being clear with parents about all of that. Because as the state keeps changing, well, eventually they're going to tell us what kids have to do to get an honors diploma. Then we got to figure out how we communicate that for kids, because the intent is for them to get the honors diploma. But Julie's right, that just having an honors class isn't going to be what gets you an honors diploma.
And you don't need an honors class currently,
To get an honors diploma,
but don't tell your kids that because they'll.
As I look at this sheet, that,
which is confusing.
well, no, I can read it, and actually, and this is the one about math. I see all these pink boxes here, and I'm assuming that most of those math courses in pink are currently not courses that we offer, many of them. Is that right?
Right, and some of the reason we don't offer them is because we don't have, there's a shortage of math and science and special ed teachers.
I know the concern has been that as we bring learners into standards that currently don't exist for many of them, I mean, and we're being pushed by the state, this is really going to push students in honors classes now,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Because I'm looking at the title of some of these courses. Some we may teach, but some perhaps not widely. Pre-calc probably in statistics, finite math, and a whole bunch of other math classes that I don't think that we offer now.
Well, and, yeah, and one of the things that, well, we offer, but not everywhere. So every child
Right.
doesn't
So
have the option.
Maybe at Snyder, but maybe not at all 5 of the high schools.
The other part is we're going to have to take advantage of technology, because just because a child's at a school that may be smaller, if they have the capability of taking one of those courses, which counts and are good things to have on their transcript, then we have to figure out how we get kids to have that option. So pink is good. Pink is higher level. Pink is what colleges are looking for. Even as kids are going into some of the CTE, some of those courses are things that they're going to have to be looking at. So we're worried about what's happening with the kids at the bottom being pushed. Well, this also has to push the kids at the top, because those are not the kind of courses that we have routinely offered, and we have to now.
Dr. Robertson, I'd like to just also interject one thing real quickly before I have to duck out. And I do apologize for not being able to stay and listen, because I know a lot of you have important things to say. The one thing I want to say is that, as Julie has already alluded to, the State Board of Education is not elected. They are appointed by the governor. We have essentially lost control of education because appointed officials who are not accountable to the people are in those positions, and they are essentially dictating to us a lot of these things, and we have these cards dealt to us, and we have to try and grapple with these changes to meet these new policies that are being handed down. And despite superintendents and others going to the meetings and voicing opposition, asking for more time, knowing that this implementation is going to be a rough transition because of the speed with which it's being forced on us, it is unfortunate because now we don't have the luxury of having discussions on the best way to approach these new requirements. And at least we have a superintendent who is aware of what we have been doing is no longer going to be acceptable, and she's looking down the road and she's trying to position our schools so that our students will have the best opportunities to graduate using these new pathways. And unfortunately, there's so many policies that haven't even been fleshed out so that we can respond to the actuals. So we're just kind of having to even take a guess to what this might look like in the future. So I hope that you guys will understand that it's going to take all of us working together. We are now soon going to have a superintendent of education who's also not going to be elected, which means the governor is going to be the most powerful person on what happens in our schools. And so in the future, it's going to be really important to have public discussions. I commend you on taking the time and the energy to be engaged, because we all want all our stakeholders to have a say in education. But essentially, this train has left the station, and we are left with these cards we're trying to deal with, and are trying to do it in the most using as much wisdom and proactively trying to position our schools for the best. So I hope that you will give her and her staff grace, because they've just been put in a position it's not an easy position. And so I just wanted to interject that before I left. And I do apologize again for not being able to stay and to the conclusion of the meeting.
And as Mrs. Yell
Thanks,
leaves,
Glenna. Those are good points. Thank
every
you.
parent or student that contacted her, she relayed that message. So her leaving doesn't mean that she didn't explain, talk, she has something she has to do. But I also think that one of the things that is really a little disconcerting, we've been talking to politicians, and I have one say that these pathways, we didn't intend for you to have to change anything. So the inference was, if we're changing stuff, it's not their fault, it's mine. It's the district. So I hope, it's kind of hard to sit here and look at what's been laid out. And Mrs. Yell made another point. I think it's in 2023, it's way out there that the state superintendent is no longer elected, but they're taking power from her every day. And Jennifer McCormick is out there trying to bring sense to this. But she, in essence, it will not be an elected position in 2023, and every single law, including 1426, takes power out of the hands of a person who worked in schools. So I digress. Let's keep going, because you want to get to talking to us. What is changing? Content. And I'm a lifelong teacher, and when you tell teachers that what they're doing doesn't work, they take it personally, and I don't blame them. Because for a lot of kids, most teachers may know even more than parents do about kids because they're with them longer. But we have to help teachers understand, not saying you're not doing your job, but when you look at what we're faced, they're the ones working with kids, I'm not. So yes, we are going to ask their input, but at some point, my job is to decide what I tell the board we need to go forward and do. And all the board members have shared with me all the emails, and we've had these conversations about what people's concerns are. But the other thing that we have to do is we have to strengthen with the academic and emotional supports. We can't blame the kids because of where they come to us and how they come to us. It's on us if we know they need support to do it. But another comment that was made, We have to spend as much time pushing the kids at the top, because those pink math classes are rigorous math classes that you want your kids involved in. So what we got to balance is, where are the resources? And we have to put as many resources at the top as we do bringing kids up who have not been academically challenged. So, I think it's the last slide. It should be. Nope, got a couple more. This is how we do all of our planning in the district. And all this whole conversation is the first 3 boxes. So people, we haven't gotten to step 7. We're just in the first 3 boxes trying to figure out what the issue is. The third step is looking at a series of questions we have to ask ourselves. So let's get to that slide. We're doing this internally. We gave teachers and buildings some answers to some of these. These are conversations we're going to be having with staffs. But when you kind of read these, what is current and where are we trying to go and how are we going to know when we get there, and what do we need to do for individuals? So this is step 3. This is the step 3 on our arrow. But then let's go to step 3 into what we have to do. First of all, I just kind of want them to make a decision. That's the state. Then we have to give you staffing allocations and schedules. Then we have to start looking with teachers and students, so what's the details, what are the pros, what are the cons? And then we have to communicate with parents. I can't give you answers I don't have. I can only kind of tell you where we're trying to head and why we're trying to head there. So the next one, and this is why I invite people to come back. I'll be disappointed if there's nobody at the next board meeting. Because this is a 3 to 5 year process. That don't tell me one time what you want to tell me and then you don't show up when we got to do the heavy lifting. What happens with special ed and all these other things? How are we going to fund it? What are we doing with early childhood? We've got on the table, we have got to start counseling earlier. And people, we don't have enough counselors in high school. It's a joke, the ratio of counselors in high school. So as we're putting these pathways in front of kids and we're talking about people having to make decisions in 8th grade, we have got to look at what supports this community has to help us have, which means we have to work with community agencies, because we're never going to have enough money for all the needs that we have. Programs of study. If I'm going to Snyder, what do I know about biomedical at Croninger? How does any of that align? And then every month when we're here, we'll talk about the peer grant and how we're spending that money. I want to end with this quote, and I hope people take it the way it's intended. Let's, and that's all of us let's, go invent tomorrow rather than worried about what happened yesterday. Steve Jobs. Because the jobs your kids are going to have, we don't even know what they are. We don't even know what they are. And we can be stuck. It has to change. But here's the thing that I want you to be assured of when we change. You don't throw out the good stuff when you change. Change isn't starting from ground zero. This is a good district with hardworking people with lots of good things happening. But the expectation for what we have to do as a district is different, which means that the expectations for how all of us are going to have to work together is different. So, board members, with that, I'll sit down. Do you have any specific questions, or how are we going to handle this tonight?
Just a couple comments. I'm really interested in flushing out what we are going to establish as the rubric across the district to indicate to all teachers that a particular student gets the designation of honors with distinction. I don't like the varying approaches. I want to see a bar that students need to cross, and I want to see how we're going to implement that, beginning with the 9th graders coming in. Because
We're going to have to.
There's no change now, but the pathways are going to hit beginning on that next freshman class.
Well, it's got to start with 8th graders, because there are kids.
They've got to get their foot up on
Right.
algebra.
Here's one of the things that we had Senator Cruz with us on Friday. Do you realize that if an 8th grader takes algebra as an 8th grader, they don't get a high school credit? That makes no sense. Doesn't make any sense at all.
No, you don't.
No,
It
that
doesn't
will,
count.
that will change.
Yeah, hopefully, we're working on it.
That's a proposed change.
Right. But right now, hold on, you get a credit. It doesn't count in terms of how many math courses you have to take in high school.
Right.
So what we're trying to get is if you took it in 8th grade and were capable, why doesn't it count?
As a math credit.
So those are some of the kind of things that we're trying to to work through. There are a couple of things, and we're going to be, in the next week or two, putting out, remember I talked about the 21st century skills? When you're looking at some of the pathway expectations in that number 2 box, that kind of aligns with what kind of things do people need to demonstrate to demonstrate they've done master.
I have a question about again, the honors becoming integrated within an academic classroom. Are there any schools who have done this? Is there any research we can look at to see how this has worked, how it has impacted student
Probably
performance?
not. Julie had one example, but it was in California in a very wealthy district.
Silicon Valley.
Yeah. One of the things that, because I've talked to other superintendents, there are no requirements in a lot of districts as to how you get in honors. You get to choose. So it's kind of all over the board. That's why I was talking about the fact there's no consistent way that across the state or the nation it's determined how kids get in honors. So people say, well, I don't have any requirements. If they sign up for it, they get to take it. You know, so it's kind of like a mixed bag, and that's one of the reasons we got to define it.
But other school districts haven't done this, so we can't see how it's working?
Other districts have made all kids take algebra in 8th grade, and I can get you a list of those. Other districts, like the math progressions we're trying to start, other districts have done that. And so
But-
I can get you some examples of where they are.
But you don't have any research for how these integrated classes help my honors kid now put it in?
Okay, well, I think part of the thing that I guess I'm not trying to, we got to define integrated. Because if we establish what the standards are for 9th grade language arts, and we establish what the standards are and the expectations for a product for someone who's going to get an honors distinction, the kids getting the honors distinction, we still have to ensure that they have nailed the 9th grade standards. So see, one of the things that we don't talk enough about is if you're going to have kids having to take these standardized norm tests that kids all across the country are taking, then there's some basic skills that we better ensure that kids have mastered. So when you say integrated, we got to be figuring out, well, how do we know that kids have mastered the skills in 8th grade that they're going to need in 9th grade, that they're going to need in 10th, 11th, and 12th? So I can't stand here today and tell you how that's going to look. I can't tell you a district where they have done it. But there's a lot of stuff we do in this district that I can't show you somebody has done it. The results will be in how many kids graduate, if the kids are able to score higher on the SAT, if the kids pass, it used to be end of course, looking at our Algebra 1, Algebra 2 geometry failure rates or success rates. So we can get into a lot of data, but the data in terms of which kids are successful or not successful in some of those courses is also driving the need for us to have this conversation. And right now, everybody doesn't take them. So we've got to look at where the kids who have been in honors classes, then what happens with our standardized test scores that come from the state. And we've kind of flashed some of that up. But no, I can't tell you if you go to Ohio in this district. But that's why we got to have these conversations to talk about what it means and what data we're going to use and how we're going to know if it's working. But here's the part I don't want people thinking. We're not experimenting. These are the standards. This is the pathway. Here's the expectation. So how do we take what we're doing now? How do we make sure that the kids at the top keep getting into the pink? How do we make sure that the kids in the green are going to be able to graduate because they're still going to have to take some of the tests that before now they weren't even taking? And so we got a lot of conversations to have. What I have laid out tonight is where we start. Where we start.
I think it would be helpful as we get more folks involved in this conversation that somehow we circle back. I mean, with respect to what Ann just asked about who else is doing this, I think we also need to recognize the fact that the district has hired 3 nationally recognized organizations that provide consulting services.
And they can tell us.
And will be working with us. And it would be helpful just to make people aware of their credentials and their experiences with respect to the Dana Center, center point in Discovery Education with science, math, and language arts that, these people are good people, and I think we've hired some good folks to help us with that. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but we've got some good people working with us.
I did spend the afternoon searching, and the first thing I did was go to the Dana Center website and looked at the districts that they mention. And like I said, I found no district that is comparable to ours that is doing what we are proposing doing.
And they'll say that. And one of the things they said to us when we got started, they said that one of the reasons they don't get very far with most districts is that they don't have professional learning communities and professionals who are at a level that they can go to the next level. They said most of the work they have to do when they go in is to create a climate and culture for excellence. So part of the reason that we're even capable of having some of these conversations is people remember we did high school redesign. Okay, we've talked about standards. We had all the work we're doing with our school improvement planning process. So I think that when they get here, we can ask that question. But I think here's the other thing. We don't hire consultants for them to bring us in a canned package for what someplace else looks like. And part of, remember that slide where I said, part of we have to decide is how am I going to tell you that it works? So we're going to have that going in. So what's going to be the measure of the success? How are we going to know 6 months in? How are we going to know 9 months in?
On the slide, I think there was like 3 weeks where teachers will have professional learning, and in this time, are they expected to be able to learn how to deal with a classroom where, like language arts, they are at a 2nd or 3rd grade reading level up to a college age reading level, or in math. Some of them really may not even be mastered 7th grade math, and they're in 8th, 9th, or 10th grade, and some are, well, it comes naturally, they're well above and beyond even what the class they're in. Will our teachers receive that during that 3 weeks, and is that ongoing year to year for them?
First of all, we're going to start that this spring before they leave, because not only do the teachers need to get a jump start on that, kids need to have a clear expectation of what they're going to walk into in the fall. We have seen that it's not, summer programming doesn't work when you try to think kids are going to come back in the summer. So our intent is after testing this spring to start having some of those conversations with teachers and students while they're all there. Because remember, this is a 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th, 7th, 8th conversation. And so we've got to be explaining to the 5th graders what the expectation is for going into the 6th grade. And to your question, it's a every year, every quarter, every summer, we are committing ourselves, this never ends. Because every year you're going to get new teachers. Every year you're going to get new kids. And so as we start adopting textbooks, after we decide, are we going to have textbooks or is it going to be all online? That's a whole nother learning process. So one of the reasons that we're fortunate to have this peer grant is that's why the money's going for that. Because teachers have, some of them take jobs in the summer. Well, we got to pay teachers to come to be involved in the in-service. We have to try to do it when we can get as many of them while the school year is still involved. It'll go on. It never ends.
Another thought, our classes, especially at this, like the AP level, I know I see, classes with more than 30 kids. And everybody knows that like 1 to 18 ratio is the ideal class size. So it's not easy with an AP class of 37 students. So with this new idea for our math and language arts class, will we be able to reduce class size with this grant? And do we expect to have a more reasonable class size within these?
We can't with the grant, but remember we had conversations about surplusing some positions to use those positions to look at class size and making this program work. So what we're going to have to do as a district is prioritize. And the priority right now is class size and how many teachers we're going to have to make this work. That means there's some other things we might not be able to do. We're still going to have art, music, and PE and extracurriculars. But we have to look at what it is we have to do, because the real ideal class size, research will tell you, is when you have 13 to 1. We're never going to get to that. So what we have to really start looking at is who needs resources when. I'm not going to tell you that everybody's going to get the same thing, because the data should guide. Where are the kids who are at the top that we need to push faster? Because resources aren't just for the kids who need to come up. How am I going to offer the pink classes? Where are we going to get resources for the pink classes? How are we going to pay for kids to, there may be some child who wants to take 5 AP courses. They're fortunate that their parents have $600. Well, if they don't, do they not take an AP course? What are we going to do as a district, and how are we going to support it?
Will we consider, because right now, mostly students who take AP classes are juniors and seniors. Will we consider moving that to sophomore and freshman level at all?
I think that, and that's part of the conversation, that's why it's going to take us so long. I think that one of the things we have to be real careful of as a district is that we're only known for remediating. I want, if a child is capable in the 6th grade of taking a higher level course, we got to figure out a way for that to happen. Because all kids, even all kids in honors courses and AP courses, are not all at the same level. So I think that we have got to, if we're going to stay viable and be competitive, then we got to figure out when kids are ready for certain courses, how do we get it to them? How do we deliver it? That's not always going to be a classroom teacher. But if I'm a parent and I've got a child that's something that they're capable of doing, they should be able to do it. But then the same token, this is something we got to work with the state. Well, you shouldn't be punished that your child is capable, that the things don't count for graduation if they take them earlier. So there are a lot of different pieces to this. The reason we did this big, we got to start having the conversation, but people have to be real clear about why we're having it. And I just need to say this. We got to stop thinking of a deficit, that for somebody else to get something, you got to take it away from me. We can't operate that way. We have to figure out how we're going to maintain the kids at the top, we're going to push the kids at the middle, and we're not going to let the ones who are struggling drop even further, because we all pay for that. And we're going to do that with less support and money. The state didn't give me $50 million to help teachers. We had to go get that grant. So not only do we have to worry about the pathways, we got to worry about how much money this district gets to do the work they're trying to do.
Now, Dr. Robinson, you said earlier that what we have talked about tonight is a proposal, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. So does anyone have, I mean, we are here to listen. There'll be another board meeting. I think I'm going to reserve any comments or questions I have until a later date, because we've got a lot of people here that want to be heard. Does anyone else have any questions or comments at the moment?
No, I think that's a good idea.
So we will
Okay.
formally adjourn the meeting and then open up the
Right.
microphones for speakers.
Correct.
Can I ask a question, can I ask for something? And I don't care if you have your name on it or not. But if you stand up and speak, we're going to try to take notes. But what I'd like for you to do is to put your comments on Let's Talk. Because if we're trying to gather what people have as concerns, as good as we are, we're not going to remember all of you saying something. So you don't have to put your name on it, but put it at Let's Talk and say, I was at the board meeting, here's what I want you to hear. Because then we're going to try to be trying to get our Q&A and to respond to some of the questions. So that would be helpful if people would do that.
And just, and again, for all of us, the people who are here and the board members, since this is a proposal, are we working on a deadline? Do we have when are we going to make a decision for next year?
Okay, I think we had a couple of things running. The decision about the 8th grade algebra, that's a decision, because we got to figure out that part. I think the biggest conversation is the honors conversation. And for all intents and purposes, the first thing we have to do is to get allocation. So we're not going to really be having those allocation conversations until the first couple of weeks in March. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's probably about the 14th or so of March. So I think what we've got to do in between
And
now
then
and...
students, and then, so students would be getting like course selection sheets for next year then?
So we need to have a conversation before the course selection sheet.
Exactly.
So some have,
So we're talking mid-March? Okay,
because if we don't, then we're going to be behind
right,
in terms of what we have to do for next time.
Right.
But in between time, we'll be having conversations at schools with teachers around this whole concept of honors,
okay.
okay?
Okay, well, if there are no further comments from board members, we will soon adjourn the meeting and open it up to listen to your comments. I've got a list of names that I'm going to read. We'll give you 3 minutes, and our clerk will fire a warning shot when you've got a minute left. And, but if you're not on this list, then when we get to the end of the list, anyone else is welcome to come to the microphone. I mean, I've got all night. So we'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved. Second.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Steve and Tom. All those in favor of adjourning, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, so the first of our speakers is Noah Smith.